And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and here is your Alaska aviation weather outlook for Sunday into Monday on this Saturday, April 6th. Well, what we've had going on here as of this Saturday afternoon, we've had a strong low pressure over the lower Bering. That low is going to cross the eastern Aleutians and slide into the North Pacific this Saturday night into early Sunday morning. Meanwhile, this Saturday afternoon, we're going to have secondary low developing south of Kodiak Island and then swinging up and sitting in the Gulf. That low will actually pull back toward the western Gulf along the Kenai coast or toward the entrance of Cook Inlet as we get into Monday night and Tuesday. So this is going to keep the Gulf region active here for the late weekend and early next week. So we expect IFR conditions across much of the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay into the eastern Aleutians Sunday morning, pockets of IFR across areas of the Panhandle because there is an initial trough front that has pushed into this region with showers. There will be a reinforcing batch of precipitation, rain along sea level and snow in the higher elevations as we go through Sunday afternoon and evening, kind of an enhanced round. Then we find IFR conditions along portions of the Alaska Range up here along the east central interior Alcan border, as well as along the spine of the Brooks Range up into the North Slope and into areas of the Arctic coast, especially east of Utqiagvik to Kaktovik. Sunday afternoon, we find IFR conditions here along the intercoastal mountains and higher elevations inside of the Panhandle. MVFR prevalent throughout the inner channels and outer south and western coast. And then as we go across the interior, pockets of IFR along areas of the Alaska Range and on up in the Tanana Valley, and especially along the spine of the Brooks Range and North Slope. And for Monday morning, IFR conditions will be rather extensive throughout much of the Panhandle, especially the inner channels up along the coastal mountains there in British Columbia. And then a broad area of IFR conditions from the Alaska Range northward all the way through the Brooks Range and along most of the areas of the North Slope and the Arctic coast. More interestingly, though, is we have cold air, cold, dry air coming southward. So this cold front that's going to be pushing southward Sunday will be driving colder air all the way down into the Alaska Peninsula later Monday and early Tuesday. That's what's going to help pull that low back toward the west end of the Gulf here as we go into Monday night and Tuesday. So looking at Monday afternoon, we find IFR conditions continuing along intercoastal mountains of the Panhandle and Northeast Gulf Coast, areas of the Alaska Range, and as we go up here in the Tanana Valley and also up there along areas of the North Slope and central eastern Arctic coast. So pass conditions coming up Anaktuvik Pass, we expect generally IFR conditions to hold there northward into the North Slope. MVFR conditions as you fly south of the south entrance on Sunday. Same thing Atigun Pass. IFR across the pass and especially to the north as you're going up there through the North Slope, but areas out to the south of their MVFR. Lake Clark and Merrill, generally MVFR conditions will be the rule on Sunday, though as you get just north of Merrill Pass, IFR conditions will rule. So as you get up there toward Rainy Pass, as well as Windy Pass, we expect IFR conditions in that area of the Alaska Range. Further east, Isabel may start out kind of on the edge of some IFR conditions, giving way to MVFR, and then further east, Mentasta Pass itself should generally remain VFR on Sunday, though as you fly south, you'll encounter some MVFR conditions there into the Copper River Valley. Tonita Pass, MVFR conditions becoming VFR on Sunday. Portage Pass, west entrance stays VFR on Sunday, but the eastern entrance and out toward Prince William Sound starts out IFR, but it will then become VFR there in the pass. And then Chilkoot and White will remain IFR on Sunday. Looking at the freezing levels, not a whole lot to show in terms of freezing levels aloft. 2,000 and 4,000 feet well south of Haida Gwaii in the North Pacific, and then also back out toward northwest Canada. But the surface freezing line running from around the inner channels here of the Panhandle back across the northern Gulf Coast and up toward the upper end of the Alaska Peninsula, Bristol Bay extending westward to near St. Paul. And so again, There is some colder air that is going to be dropping southward as we go through the day on Sunday, especially up here from the Chukchi. That cold air is going to begin to accelerate southward. We'll have some breezier conditions through this area. As far as icing potential, there could be some icing above 2,000 feet along the spine of the Brooks Range, north slope, central, eastern Arctic coast. More importantly, with that secondary low down here that'll develop and move up into the Gulf, we expect along an old frontal boundary above 4,000 feet, considerable icing possible. Also south of the Alaska Peninsula there across areas of the North Pacific. Now, the jet stream pattern shows a jet core as high as 155 knots just south of the Gulf in the North Pacific and coming up into Haida Gwaii in British Columbia. Up here, we notice some winds out of the north that are across eastern Russia, and this little upper level jet feature is what's going to help drive that colder air mass, a late season Arctic air mass further south. So at 700 millibars, 9,000 feet, we find that northwesterly flow over eastern Russia. A pocket of winds in excess of 50 knots in the North Pacific, well south of the Gulf, but coming onshore with southwest flow into British Columbia as high as 55 knots. And at 3,000 feet, this tells more of the story. We have low circulation on Sunday that'll be developing and spreading into the Gulf. 35 knot southwest flow into areas of the Panhandle, even little isolated 40 knots there, just outside of Yakutat Bay. And then on the back side of the system, we have winds across the Aleutians out of the northeast, about 35 knots. And then up here, Seward Peninsula, Bering Strait down along just the outer portion of the Yukon Delta coastline, northeast flow, right around 35 knots. So the potential for turbulence, cold front working its way, very quick shot of cold air coming south along the west side of the state. So we expect some moderate turbulence, lower Chukchi from Point Hope down across areas, especially the north and west side of the Seward Peninsula, including St. Lawrence Island. And then a broad area of moderate turbulence along the Aleutians into the lower portion of the Alaska Peninsula, surface to 3,000 or 4,000 feet, and then also potential for moderate turbulence along areas of the northern, northeastern Gulf Coast into the Panhandle, surface to 5,000 feet.